Have you ever looked at someone and thought, I love her? But then, later that night, when everything was quiet, a strange question slipped into your mind. Do I actually love her? Or do I just love how she makes me feel? Most men never stay with that question long enough to hear the answer, because the answer is uncomfortable. And tonight I want to tell you something that might change the way you see every relationship you've ever had. Not tomorrow, not years from now, right now. And if you've ever loved someone, lost someone, or you're still trying to understand why one woman stayed in your mind long after she left, then stay with me. And while you're here, if these conversations help you see yourself more clearly, consider subscribing. Not because of an algorithm, because sometimes one honest insight can arrive at exactly the moment a man needs it. Now, let's talk about the first sign of true love. And no, it's not obsession, it's not butterflies, it's not thinking about her every minute. In fact, some of the strongest feelings men mistake for love are often the furthest thing from it. I remember a man who once sat across from me and said something that stayed with me for years. He said, "When she didn't text me back, I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I thought that meant I loved her." Then he paused, and after a long silence he whispered, "But when she was happy without me, I felt angry." That sentence revealed everything, because true love and emotional dependency can feel almost identical in the beginning. Both create intensity, both create longing, both keep someone constantly on your mind. But only one of them allows another person to be free. Think about that. When you genuinely love someone, something unusual happens inside you. You stop seeing them as a solution to your loneliness. You stop seeing them as a reward. You stop seeing them as proof that you're enough. Instead, you begin seeing them as a separate human being, with fears you didn't create, dreams that don't revolve around you, needs you can't always satisfy. And strangely enough, that's when love becomes real. Most people don't fall in love with a person, they fall in love with a story. The story says, she'll heal me, she'll choose me, she'll make me feel important, she'll finally remove this emptiness I've been carrying. But sooner or later, reality arrives, and reality is inconvenient, because the woman isn't the story, she's a person, and people are messy. People disappoint you, people misunderstand you, people have bad days, people sometimes pull away even when they care. The first sign of true love appears at that exact moment, the moment when the fantasy cracks, the moment when you finally see who she really is. Not the ideal version, not the version your loneliness invented, the real version. And instead of losing your feelings, your respect deepens. That is rare, much rarer than attraction, much rarer than chemistry, much rarer than desire. Because desire is easy, projection is easy, fantasy is easy. Seeing someone clearly and still choosing them, that is different. That is where true love begins. And most men never notice the difference, because they're too busy chasing the feeling, not the person. And if what I'm saying feels slightly uncomfortable, good, it should. Because the truth is that many relationships don't end when love disappears. They end when illusion disappears. And those two things are not the same. The next sign is even harder to recognize, because it hides inside something most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Pain. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies. Not betrayal. Not heartbreak. I'm talking about a quieter kind of pain. The kind that arrives when you realize another person is not obligated to become who you hoped they would be. Most men encounter this moment at least once. The woman they love says something unexpected, makes a choice they don't understand, changes direction, needs space, or simply becomes more honest than they were prepared for. And suddenly something inside them starts resisting reality, because a hidden part of them had already written the script, maybe without realizing it, maybe with the best intentions, but the script was there. If I love her enough, she'll always stay. If I do everything right, she'll never change. If we're meant to be, things should feel easy. And when life refuses to follow that script, disappointment enters the room. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Disappointment is not the opposite of love. Entitlement is. Read that again in your mind. Disappointment is human. Everyone feels it. But entitlement quietly transforms love into a transaction. It says, "After everything I've given, I deserve this outcome." Love says something very different. Love says, "I can be hurt without needing to control you." And that leads us to the second sign of true love. You care about her well-being even when it doesn't immediately benefit you. Pause for a second, because this sounds simple until life tests it. Imagine a woman you deeply care about receives an opportunity, something meaningful, something that excites her. But it means less time with you. Maybe she becomes busier. Maybe she grows in ways that make the relationship more complicated. Maybe she starts discovering parts of herself she hadn't explored before. A surprising number of relationships become strained right there, not because love disappeared, because insecurity spoke louder. The man starts feeling forgotten, threatened, replaceable. And those feelings are understandable. They're human. But true love asks a difficult question. Can you celebrate her growth without making it about your fear? That question reveals more about a relationship than almost anything else. Because real love isn't threatened by another person's expansion. It doesn't require them to stay small so you can feel safe. I once heard a man describe the woman he loved in a way that struck me deeply. He said, "Watching her succeed felt strange. Part of me was scared she'd outgrow me, but another part of me was proud of her. And I realized the proud part was who I wanted to be." That sentence contains more maturity than most relationship advice on the internet. Because love doesn't erase insecurity. It simply refuses to let insecurity make all the decisions. That's an important distinction. Many people wait to become fearless before they love well. It never happens. The fear remains. The uncertainty remains. The vulnerability remains. The difference is that genuine love chooses connection despite those things. And here's something even deeper. When a man truly loves a woman, he slowly stops asking, "How can I keep her?" and starts asking, "How can I know her?" Those are completely different questions. One is driven by possession, the other is driven by love. The other is driven by curiosity. One creates pressure, the other creates intimacy. And intimacy isn't built through grand gestures, it's built through thousands of moments where two people allow each other to be real. No masks, no performances, no constant need to impress, just truth. Which brings us to another uncomfortable reality. Many men spend years trying to be the version of themselves they think a woman wants. Stronger, cooler, less emotional, more successful, more mysterious. And eventually they become exhausted. Because maintaining an image is hard, very hard. The next sign of true love appears when that image starts falling apart. And strangely enough, that's where things become real. There comes a moment in every meaningful relationship when the performance becomes too heavy to carry. At first, most people don't notice they're performing. It's subtle. A man hides certain fears because he wants to appear confident. He avoids difficult conversations because he doesn't want to seem needy. He pretends certain things don't bother him because he's afraid vulnerability will make him look weak. And for a while, it works. The relationship moves forward. The connection feels exciting. Everything appears stable. But beneath the surface, something important is missing. The real person. Because no matter how attractive the mask is, it can never be loved. Only the person behind it can. And that's where the third sign of true love reveals itself. You feel increasingly safe being honest. Not perfect, not fearless, just honest. Now notice what I didn't say. I didn't say comfortable. Those are different things. Honesty is often uncomfortable, sometimes painfully uncomfortable. There are conversations that make your heart race before they even begin. Moments where you wonder whether revealing the truth might change how someone sees you. Moments where you're tempted to stay silent because silence feels safer. Yet something remarkable happens when love is genuine. The desire to be known becomes stronger than the desire to appear flawless. Think about that. Many relationships survive on attraction. Some survive on habit. Some survive on convenience. But very few survive on truth. Truth requires courage, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind where a man admits, "That hurt me. I'm afraid. I don't have everything figured out. I need support too." And surprisingly, Those moments often create more closeness than years of trying to seem invincible. I remember speaking with a man who told me he spent most of his 20s trying to become the version of himself women would admire. He worked harder, dressed better, learned exactly what to say, built the image carefully. And it worked. People liked him, relationships happened, attention came easily. But one evening, after a relationship ended, he found himself sitting alone in his apartment asking a question he couldn't escape. If she loved me, why did I still feel unseen? The answer arrived slowly. Because she knew the character, not the man. And those are not always the same thing. That realization changed him, not overnight, but gradually. He stopped trying so hard to manage every impression, stopped treating vulnerability like a weakness, stopped believing he had to earn love by becoming extraordinary. And something unexpected happened. His relationships became deeper, not because he became more attractive, because he became more real. That's the paradox most people miss. Authenticity feels risky, performance feels safe, but over time, performance creates loneliness. Because you're constantly wondering, would they still care if they knew the whole truth? True love slowly dissolves that fear. Not completely, we're all human, but enough that honesty starts feeling less dangerous than hiding. And when that happens, a relationship becomes something rare, a place where you can exhale, a place where you don't have to calculate every word, a place where being yourself stops feeling like a gamble. But there is another sign of true love that goes even deeper than honesty, because eventually, every relationship faces a test that attraction cannot solve, a test that chemistry cannot solve, a test that charm cannot solve. Time. And time has a way of revealing what feelings are actually made of. Time is ruthless. Not because it destroys everything, because it reveals everything. In the beginning, almost any relationship can feel extraordinary. The conversations are exciting, the anticipation is addictive, every message feels important, every meeting feels charged with possibility. You notice everything, the way she laughs, the way she looks at you, the small details nobody else seems to see. And during that stage, it's easy to believe you found something permanent. But time asks a question that early attraction cannot answer. Who are you when the novelty fades? Because eventually, it does. Not the connection, not necessarily the love, the novelty. And those are different things. Many people panic when they experience this shift. They assume something is wrong. They assume the relationship has lost its spark. They assume the intense feelings from the beginning should last forever. But human psychology doesn't work that way. The nervous system cannot stay in a constant state of emotional fireworks. Life settles, routine arrives, reality enters. And that's exactly where the fourth sign of true love appears. You continue choosing each other even when the relationship stops entertaining you. That may sound unromantic at first, but it's actually one of the most romantic things imaginable, because choice is more meaningful than excitement. Excitement happens automatically. Choice requires intention. Anyone can stay when everything feels effortless. The deeper question is, who stays present when life becomes ordinary, when work is stressful, when energy is low, when conversations aren't always fascinating, when neither person is at their absolute best? That's where character starts mattering more than chemistry. I once spoke with an older man who had been married for decades. When I asked him what love felt like after all those years, I expected something poetic, something dramatic. Instead, he smiled and said, "Some days it felt exciting, some days it felt difficult, most days it felt like coming home." Coming home. I've never forgotten that. Because home isn't thrilling every second. Home is familiar, safe, real. And real things often look less dramatic than fantasies. That's one reason so many people overlook healthy love. They're searching for constant intensity. But constant intensity is exhausting. Relationships built entirely on emotional highs often become unstable, like a fire that burns brightly and then disappears. True love is different. It's warmer, steadier, less concerned with creating endless excitement, more concerned with creating trust. And trust is built through consistency, the small promises kept, the difficult conversations faced, the moments where someone shows up when they easily could have walked away. Those moments rarely go viral. Nobody writes movies about them, yet they form the foundation of almost every lasting relationship. And here's something important. Choosing someone repeatedly does not mean tolerating unhealthy behavior. It doesn't mean sacrificing your self-respect. It doesn't mean staying where you're being harmed. Real love includes boundaries. Real love includes mutual respect. Real love requires both people to participate. But when those things exist, something beautiful begins to happen. The relationship slowly becomes less about emotional excitement and more about emotional security. And emotional security is one of the most misunderstood forms of intimacy, because it doesn't always feel dramatic, it feels peaceful. Which leads us to the fifth sign, perhaps the rarest sign of all, the sign that separates love from attachment more clearly than anything else. And once you understand it, you may never look at relationships the same way again. The fifth sign is the one most people spend years misunderstanding, because from the outside, it doesn't look powerful. It doesn't create dramatic stories. It doesn't produce overwhelming emotions. In fact, many people overlook it completely. And yet, when I think about the healthiest relationships I've ever witnessed, this sign appears almost every time. Here it is. You want the other person to become more fully themselves. Not more useful to you, not easier for you, not more dependent on you. Themselves. That sounds simple, but if you sit with it for a moment, you'll realize how rare it really is. Because attachment often asks, how can I keep this person close? Love asks, how can I support who this person is becoming? Those questions can lead to very different behaviors. Attachment becomes anxious when someone changes. Love becomes curious. Attachment fears growth because growth creates uncertainty. Love understands that growth is part of being human. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about true love is that it doesn't require ownership. It doesn't demand that another person stop evolving. It doesn't ask them to shrink so your fears can feel comfortable. It wants to witness their becoming. Even when that process is complicated, even when it requires patience, even when it occasionally challenges your own insecurities. Years ago, a man told me something that quietly broke my heart. He said, I spent so much time trying to find someone who would love me that I never learned how to love someone else. There was no bitterness in his voice, just honesty. And I think many people understand that feeling more than they'd like to admit. Because when we're lonely, we often focus on receiving love, being chosen, being valued, being wanted. Those desires are natural, there's nothing wrong with them. But mature love introduces a second question, a deeper question. Who do I become when I genuinely care about another human being? That question changes everything, because true love is not just something you feel, it's something it slowly turns you into. It teaches patience, humility, empathy, responsibility. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you might otherwise avoid, your fears, your ego, your need for control, your unresolved wounds. And while that process isn't always comfortable, it is profoundly transformative. Which brings us back to where we started. Those 7 signs we've explored aren't really about identifying the perfect woman. They're about recognizing the difference between fantasy and reality, between possession and connection, between needing someone and loving someone. The first sign was seeing the real person behind the fantasy. The second was caring about their well-being beyond your own benefit. The third was feeling safe enough to be honest. The fourth was continuing to choose each other after novelty fades. And the fifth was wanting their growth, not their dependence. When these qualities exist together, something extraordinary begins to emerge. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, something better. A relationship built on reality. And reality, despite what many people believe, is where the deepest love lives. So tonight, before you move on with your day, I want to leave you with one final thought. Think about the person you've loved most in your life. Maybe they're still with you. Maybe they're not. Maybe you're still trying to understand what happened. Then ask yourself this question. Did I love who they truly were? Or did I love the role I hoped they would play in my story? Don't answer quickly. The most important answers rarely arrive quickly. Sit with it. Let it follow you for a while. Because sometimes a single honest question can reveal more about your heart than years of searching for answers. And if it does, your life may never look quite the same again.